I love Grandma under the floor, the little girl told her mother, and when they dug it up.
Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
Laura stepped down from the old, battered pickup truck driven by Mr. Ethan, a hired truck driver and the owner of the boarding house. She held her daughter Helen tightly in her arms, a skinny, silent 7-year-old girl with dark hair who clung to her mother like a shadow. In Laura's hand was a worn-out fabric suitcase, while Helen hugged a stuffed bear named Paco, the last gift from her father before he vanished without a trace. Here it is, the house just as you asked. Cheap, quiet, close to the village center, Mr. Ethan said. You might want to keep the little one away from the basement. The kids around here say that place feels cold. He hesitated. Laura frowned. Cold. Well, the air, I guess. Damp. Probably mold. I'm not superstitious, but the previous tenants left because their daughter couldn't sleep. It's nothing serious, really. Laura didn't respond. She just nodded and led Helen inside. It was an old 2-story house, its red-tiled roof already decaying, and the white limestone walls were spotted black with moss. Inside, the faded red brick floor and rickety wooden doors creaked with every gust of wind. Do you like this place, Helen? Laura asked, stroking her daughter's hair. Helen said nothing. Her eyes scanned the room and stopped on a pale gray floor tile in the center of the living room, nothing visibly special about it. I like quiet places, she murmured, still hugging Paco. That night, Laura tried to lull Helen to sleep upstairs. The wind howled through the window panes, producing a dry, moaning sound. Laura tightened the window latch, shut it firmly, and turned back to the bed. Helen was already asleep, but her hand still gripped the stuffed bear. Her eyelids twitched as if she were dreaming. Near dawn, Laura was startled awake by a soft noise. When she stepped downstairs, she found Helen sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, right on top of the gray tile. The girl had her head bowed, whispering as if speaking to someone. Grandma, don't be sad. I care about the old lady under the floor. Laura shivered. Helen, she called out. What are you doing? Helen lifted her head. Her gaze was distant, dreamy. I'm talking to her. She doesn't remember her name. She's cold. Laura rushed over and pulled her daughter up. There's no one here. Don't say things like that again, okay? Helen nodded and said nothing more. But during breakfast, her eyes kept drifting toward that gray tile, as if something invisible was calling to her. The next day, it happened again. And again the day after that. Each morning, Laura would find her daughter sitting on the floor, whispering. Mom, she's still there. I care about her. At first, Laura tried to laugh it off. You're just imagining things. Like those imaginary friends you used to talk about, remember? But Helen didn't laugh. She wasn't the cheerful little girl she had been back in the city. She had become quiet, withdrawn, and every time she mentioned the old lady, her eyes darkened with a sadness too deep for a child to understand. A week later, Laura took Helen to buy bread at Mrs. Rose's bakery. Mrs. Rose was in her 60s, had silver hair, and always wore a knitted scarf even in warm weather. Your little one looks pale, Mrs. Rose commented as she wrapped the bread. Yes, she hasn't been sleeping well lately, Laura sighed. She keeps rambling about some old lady under the floor. Do you know who lived in that house before us? Mrs. Rose's expression shifted. She tightened the string around the bread package. You're staying in the house near the old church, right? Yes. Then, don't ask any more. That place is not clean. Not clean. What do you mean? There are things better left alone. People in this village live for peace. We don't want to stir up what's been buried for a long time. Laura tried to ask more, but Mrs. Rose had already turned away to serve the next customer. On the way home, Laura gripped the steering wheel, her mind spinning. On one side, concern for her daughter. On the other, a growing fear creeping inside her. "Helen, do you see someone talking to you?" she asked. "No, but I hear her crying. Every night. She's in pain." Laura shuddered. She didn't believe in ghosts. She was a single mother who had done every job imaginable to raise her daughter: cleaning, kitchen work, babysitting. She believed in exhaustion, in stress-induced delusions. But when she looked into Helen's eyes, she didn't see a child making up stories. She saw sadness. A sadness that didn't belong in childhood. That night, Laura quietly laid a blanket down to sleep beside her daughter. The wind once again howled through the window like a mourning wail. Laura lay still, eyes wide open, holding Helen close. Suddenly, she heard whispering. "I care about her. She's hurting, Mom." Laura sat bolt upright. Helen was still asleep, but her lips were moving. Her hand stretched out, pointing directly toward the gray tile below through the wooden floor of the upstairs bedroom, as if her intuition ignored gravity. The old lady under the floor. "Helen, what are you drawing?" Laura asked, eyes still on the frying pan where the eggs were burning on one side. Helen didn't answer. She was focused on her black pencil and a tattered piece of paper. Laura turned off the stove, wiped her hands on a towel, and walked to the kitchen table. When she looked down at the paper, her heart skipped a beat. On the smeared white surface was the image of a woman in a gray nun's robe. Her face had no features, just a pitch-black circle scratched with frantic, overlapping strokes. Below her feet was a dark stain like blood, and around her were three stick-figure men with raised arms, as if they were beating her. "Helen, who is this?" Laura asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "She is," Helen replied, eyes still locked on the drawing. "She doesn't remember her name. I'm helping her remember." "Where did you see this person?" "In my head." Laura swallowed hard, feeling a chill at the back of her neck. "Helen, when did you start drawing things like this?" The girl looked up. "When she started telling me stories." Laura held her head in her hands. She had thought about taking Helen to a psychologist, but the village didn't have any qualified clinics. And going to the city would mean losing her bakery job, losing their cheap housing. Everything would fall apart. That afternoon, while Laura was folding clothes upstairs, she heard a low murmur coming from below. She crept down quietly. Helen was lying face down on the living room floor, again right on top of the gray tile. She spoke very softly, but the tone wasn't a child's. It was raspy and trembling, like that of an old woman. "It hurts, they tied me up, then laughed, so cold, too cold." "Helen!" Laura screamed, rushing to pick her up. The girl didn't react. Her eyes stayed closed, but her lips kept moving. "I'm scared, they're keeping her down there." Laura shook her hard. Helen opened her eyes. "Mom. Was I dreaming?" You were talking to someone," Laura stammered. "I don't remember, just felt cold." That night, Laura couldn't sleep. She stepped onto the porch and lit a cigarette. The sound of an owl hooting from the distant trees startled her. When she turned to go back inside, she saw Mrs. Rose standing on the other side of the stone fence. "Do you need something?" Laura asked, slightly startled. "I heard, the girl. She's talking to her again." Laura hesitated. "Her, who?" "My daughter keeps saying strange things." Mrs. Rose stepped closer, voice low. "I'll tell you a few things, but you must not repeat this to anyone in the village." Laura nodded. "When I was young, no one dared rent that place. There was a family once, the Cortez couple. Good people. Their daughter Anna was just 12. Every night she screamed in her sleep, said a woman was buried beneath the house. And what happened? They left overnight. Didn't say a word. Since then, people avoid even mentioning that house. But do you know what really happened?" Mrs. Rose looked around, then whispered, "Some say it used to be a nursing home long ago. Then the war came, it became a temporary shelter for nuns. But after the 70s, no one really knows. Do you believe there's a ghost there?" Mrs. Rose didn't reply. She just gave a faint nod and quietly turned away. Laura felt her chest tighten. She didn't believe in the supernatural, but she couldn't deny that something deeply unusual was happening to Helen. Something very, very wrong. The next morning, Laura took Helen to the village's elementary school. Her homeroom teacher, Ms. Emily Smith, was a woman in her 30s with brown hair tied in a bun and a gentle voice. "She looks a little pale," Ms. Emily remarked. "Has she been having any issues lately?" "She's been having strange dreams. Drawing disturbing images. Talking to herself." Ms. Emily paused thoughtfully. "It could be the adjustment. Many children react that way when they move to a new place. I'll keep an eye on her and let you know if anything seems off." Laura nodded in thanks. But by noon, when she returned to pick up Helen, Ms. Emily came out with a tense expression. "Ms. Laura. Helen painted this today during arts and crafts," she said, handing her a watercolor painting. The image made Laura freeze, a woman with her hands tied, mouth open as if screaming, surrounded by knives, crucifixes, and 3 laughing shadowy figures. "Did she say anything else?" Laura asked. Ms. Emily nodded, lowering her voice. "She said the woman was in pain. She said, she asked me to draw it so no one would forget." Laura clenched the paper in her hand. The smeared colors, warped by Helen's damp fingers, made the picture even more horrifying. That night, Laura called Mr. Ethan, the landlord. "Mr. Ethan, I need to know who lived here before me." You're calling at this hour to ask that?" "Just answer me." I don't know for sure. The previous owner was Mr. Fabian. He passed away. His son sold me the house and moved away. No one likes talking about that place. I don't need warnings, I need the truth. That's all I know. You should just let things be, Ms. Laura. My daughter is being affected. I can't let it be. People in this village don't like the past being dug up. I'm telling you for your own good." Laura hung up. Her hands were shaking. She looked over at Helen, sitting cross-legged on the floor, whispering again. "Her name is Mary, but they all called her the Madwoman." "Helen. Who told you that name?" "I don't know. She told me in my dream. She cried, she was tied up, and they poured cement." Laura stood frozen. Her lips were dry, the veins in her temples throbbing. She dropped to her knees and hugged Helen tightly. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here." Helen didn't hug her back. She only whispered. "I'm scared, what if she gets angry?" Laura sat motionless in front of the small bathroom mirror. The foggy steam reflected her haggard face, sunken eyes from too many sleepless nights. The drip-drip of the leaky faucet echoed like a ticking clock, counting down to something inevitable. "Helen," she whispered. "Who are you listening to?" The next morning, after dropping Helen off at school, Laura headed straight to the town library, a weathered stone building off the main square, with red tile roofing and a musty smell. The librarian was an elderly man named Gabriel, with silver hair, thick glasses, and eyes that always seemed to squint at the world with suspicion. "Good morning," Laura said as she entered. "I'd like to look up some old records, newspapers from the 1970s. Gabriel eyed her over his glasses. "What makes someone as young as you interested in those dusty old pages?" he asked. I want to learn more about the history of the area I'm living in." "Where exactly?" "Near the old church, the house with the red-tiled floor." Gabriel paused for a moment. Then, without a word, he got up and disappeared into the back. A few minutes later, he returned, placing a dusty, moldy fabric-bound box on the table. Local newspaper archives from 1965 to 1980. Read what you want. Just don't lose anything, they're the last of their kind. Thank you. Laura sat down. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the yellowing pages. The smell of time and forgotten truths weighed heavily on her chest. Headlines flashed by: Spring Festival at Silverwood, Teen Girl Disappears in Woods, Great Storm of 1971. And then, on a torn page, a small headline hit her like a blow to the chest. Nun Mary Allen missing under mysterious circumstances. Silverwood, June 1974. Laura flipped through carefully. The article was short, but haunting. Sister Mary Allen, age 28, who served at the village's main church, has not been seen since June 12. The last person known to have seen her was Father Lawrence, a respected priest in the community. According to church sources, Sister Mary had exhibited signs of mental instability in recent weeks and may have left the village on her own. No signs of violence were found. The case is currently being treated as a missing person. Laura read the name again and again, Mary Allen. She felt certain she had heard Helen whisper it either in a dream or when speaking to the cold floor. She searched through the rest of the box but found nothing more. Everything stopped there, as if someone had deliberately buried the story. Mr. Gabriel, she called. Do you remember anything about the missing nun? He looked up, his eyes slow and thoughtful. It was a long time ago. I was still a college student back then, home for the summer. Mary, she was kind. Always helping the poor. And then one day, gone. No body was ever found. Father Lawrence said she was mentally ill, that she left during the night. No one suspected anything. Miss, he said with a shrug, back then, the priest's word was law. Laura said nothing. She knew she had to go further. That night, Helen came down with a fever. She lay limp on the bed, dark circles under her eyes, lips dry, talking in a daze. I saw her, she had a baby, she cried, but no one believed her. Laura shuddered. She placed a cold cloth on her daughter's forehead. Helen mumbled again, her voice disjointed, as if someone else was speaking through her. They tied her up. They said she was crazy. But she wasn't. She had a baby, and no one believed her. Honey, stop, please stop, Laura whispered, clutching her tightly. Rain began to fall outside the window. Heavy drops pounded like fists on Laura's chest. She sat in the dark, holding Helen's trembling body, her mind spinning with questions. If Mary had been pregnant, falsely branded insane, then who was the father? She recalled the article. The last person to see Mary was Father Lawrence. The next morning, Laura visited Mr. Anthony Brooks, an old man known as the oldest living soul in Silverwood. His small home sat at the edge of the woods, roof covered in pine needles, walls weathered by time. Mr. Anthony opened the door, his gaze half curious, half cautious. I know who you are. You're the one renting the house near the church, aren't you? Yes. I need to ask about the past. About Sister Mary Allen. He paused. I thought they buried that memory long ago. But my daughter, she's reliving it. He stepped out onto the porch, motioned to the chair across from him. Sit down. I don't know much, but I know things you won't find in papers. Laura sat. A cold wind blew, carrying away dry leaves. Mary wasn't insane. That's the first thing you should know, he said. She was kind, polite. But one day she started avoiding everyone. Didn't attend mass. Didn't go out. Just stayed in her room. People whispered she was pregnant. Who was the father? No one dared say. But I heard things, from someone who worked at the rectory. What kind of things? That Father Lawrence used to visit Mary's room late at night, many times. After she got pregnant, he quietly sent 2 men from the village, to take care of it. Laura clenched her fists. And then she disappeared? No. That night, someone heard screaming, from the very house you live in. Someone? Old Mrs. Caroline. She's gone now. So. Mary never left that house. I believe that. Laura stood, her head buzzing. Thank you. Thank you for not staying silent like the rest of this village. But be careful. Some truths, if you touch them, this community will cast you out. They don't want the past unearthed. Laura looked at him. I'm not afraid. I'm only afraid my daughter will lose herself if I keep pretending nothing's wrong. Laura sat alone in the living room. The dim ceiling light cast a pale glow on the gray tile Helen always pointed to. She placed the old newspaper and Helen's drawing side by side on the table, her hands trembling. Each piece fit together like a horrific puzzle: Mary Allen, the missing nun. Helen's whispers in her sleep, the black scribbled drawings, and the unnamed tile beneath her feet. There's no more doubt, she whispered. A gust of wind swept through the cracks in the door, carrying the house's signature smell damp and cold. Laura stood, went into the storage room, and pulled out an old shovel left behind by the landlord. She looked over at Helen sleeping on the sofa, her forehead damp with sweat. Each dream left her more exhausted. Laura gripped the shovel tightly. She couldn't wait any longer. She began to dig. The shovel clanged against the tiled floor, echoing in the silence of the night. With every strike, dust and debris flew. She panted, drenched in sweat. The floor was tougher than expected, the cement layer clearly poured to hide something. The sound woke Helen. She sat up suddenly, wide-eyed. "Mom, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I'm helping her," Laura replied, not stopping. Helen stared at the half-broken tile, where a dark red stain had begun to seep into the dirt. "Mom. I'm scared. She doesn't want to be touched." Laura froze. "You hear her?" "No, but I feel it." Before Laura could answer, a loud knock came at the front door. Thud. 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 Laura jumped. She dropped the shovel and walked toward the door. "Who is it?" "It's me, Ethan," came the landlord's voice. "What the hell are you doing in there?" Laura opened the door. Outside, it wasn't just Mr. Ethan, but also 3 other village men: Julian, Matthew, and Samuel, neighbors who had once exchanged polite words with her, now staring at her with unfamiliar eyes, full of caution. "I heard digging," Ethan said sternly. "Neighbors reported it." "What are you doing?" "I'm digging up the floor. There's a body buried here." All 4 men fell silent. Matthew frowned, then chuckled. "You're kidding, right? What is this, a crime show fantasy?" "I'm not kidding. I have evidence. There's blood, a nun's veil, a letter." "You don't understand what you're calling up," Julian cut in, voice sharp. Laura looked each of them in the eye. "I'm calling up the truth. The truth you've all buried under this floor. You're not from here." Samuel stepped closer. "You don't understand the rules of this village. Some things are better left alone." "Rules? You mean the kind that protect rapists? That bury women alive and silence everyone?" "You're insulting this entire village," Matthew snapped. "Then this village deserves to be insulted." Their expressions shifted. The air turned thick with tension. Helen peeked out from behind her mother, clutching her stuffed bear Paco, trembling. "Stop this now," Ethan said. "I have the right to evict you if you're doing something dangerous." "Go ahead," Laura challenged. "But I'll take this to the press. The police. Anyone who will listen." Julian clenched his fists and stepped right up to her face. "This is your final warning." "And this is my final decision," Laura replied, slamming the door shut. Outside, the sound of angry footsteps faded into the distance. Laura turned around, her heart pounding. Helen looked up at her, eyes wet. "Will we be okay, Mom?" "We will," Laura said, pulling her close. "I promise." She resumed digging. After nearly 2 exhausting hours, beneath the hardened soil and gray cement, 3 objects emerged: a decayed, tattered nun's veil, a broken brass crucifix, tarnished green, and just below that, a dark red stain, soaked deep into the ground, as dark as rusted iron. Laura choked back a gasp. She reached out and picked up the crucifix. At that exact moment, Helen screamed. "Mom! No!" Her body convulsed. She stiffened entirely, eyes rolled back. In a panic, Laura tossed the crucifix aside and rushed to her daughter. "Helen! Baby! Look at me!" No response. Helen's mouth stayed open, wailing sounds that weren't even words. Laura carried her to the bedroom, laid her down, and scrambled to grab a cold cloth, gently patting her cheeks. "Helen! It's Mommy! I'm right here." Gradually, the girl's body relaxed. Her eyes closed, her breathing heavy like she had just escaped a nightmare. Laura sank to the floor, hands trembling. Her gaze drifted back to the crucifix still lying on the ground. Under the dim light, it glowed with a strange reddish hue. She knew now this wasn't imagination. Not delusion. She had truly touched a buried injustice and unrest soul, a story the entire village had worked to forget. Laura whispered through tears. "You'll be okay. I'll find the whole truth. I promise." The next morning, Laura sat silently on the floor, eyes fixed on the freshly disturbed earth. Beside her were the broken crucifix, the decayed veil, and a new item she had uncovered after clearing the remaining dirt in the corner. It was a small, rotting silk pouch, carefully wrapped in old cloth and wedged between 2 broken tiles. Laura opened it. Inside was a letter, sealed in yellowed plastic. The ink had faded, but was still readable. Her hand trembling, she opened it and read. "If someone finds this letter, I am likely dead. My name is Mary Allen, a nun at Silverwood. I was raped by Father Lawrence and 2 men from the village. I became pregnant. I prayed. I begged. But no one believed me. They said I was insane. I fear they will kill me to silence me. If I disappear, please look for me, under the house next to the old church. Please tell my son I never abandoned him. Don't let the truth die with me." Laura let the letter fall from her hands, limp with shock. There were no more doubts, no more vague memories. This was the dying confession of a woman buried alive for daring to speak the truth. "Helen, you heard all of it before anyone else." She turned to her daughter, still lying on the sofa, her temple drenched in sweat. But as Laura approached, Helen suddenly sat up. And the look in her eyes was not a child's. She was pregnant. They forced her into silence, the girl said, voice hoarse, low, filled with fury. "Helen." Laura stepped back. "What's happening to you?" "We already told them. But no one believed. No one believed." Who are you?" Helen turned to her mother, her gaze hollow. She hurt. They tied her down. All 3 of them held her arms. And they laughed. She cried. But no one came. Laura clutched her chest. Her heart felt crushed under a weight she couldn't bear. "Helen, stop. It's me. Mommy. Look at me." The girl tilted her head. "You're the only one who listened. You're the only one who dug." Suddenly, she collapsed onto the couch, eyes shut. Laura rushed over and held her. Helen was drenched in sweat, her skin cold as ice. "Sweetheart, please stop talking. Mommy's here." A moment later, Helen opened her eyes. Her voice was soft again, but weary. "Mom. I dreamed of blood, so much blood. Laura didn't know what to say. She simply hugged her tighter. That afternoon, Laura brought the letter and the evidence to Mrs. Rose, the only person in the village who had made her feel remotely safe. Mrs. Rose opened the door, and upon seeing Laura's stricken face, quietly let her in. I found it, Laura said, placing the letter on the table. Mary was buried alive. And the ones who did it were Father Lawrence and 2 men from this village. Mrs. Rose skimmed the letter, then covered her mouth. Oh Lord! Why did everyone stay silent? Why didn't you say anything from the start? Mrs. Rose trembled and collapsed into a chair. We were scared. Back then. Father Lawrence's word was law. If you questioned him, you'd be excommunicated. Your children wouldn't be baptized. My husband once asked about Mary, he was fired the next week. No one dared speak after that. But this is a crime. Laura slammed her hand on the table. This whole village helped cover up a rape and murder. You think I don't regret it? Mrs. Rose sobbed. Every night I dream of Mary's eyes, full of despair during her final service. Laura stood. I won't let this stay buried. I'm going to bring the truth into the light. You have to be careful. Some of the villagers, they're the descendants of the men who did this. They'll do anything to protect their honor. I don't care about the honor of a rotten village, Laura said, her eyes steely. That night, Helen had another fever. She murmured in her sleep, her voice whispering vivid fragments of memory. Father Lawrence held her head. He shoved cloth into her mouth. The other 2 held her arms. One was named Julian, the other Samuel. Laura sat frozen. Those names weren't unfamiliar, they were the same 2 men who had banged on her door during the digging. Mom, she cried, she begged them not to bury her, but they didn't listen. Laura clutched her ears. Stop, please stop. Suddenly, the light in the room flickered. Laura looked up. No wind. No faulty wiring. But the bulb blinked steadily, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Then Helen opened her eyes and looked at her mother. She spoke slowly. She said, it's almost time. Time for what? The time for everyone to know. The time for everyone to pay. Rain had been falling since afternoon, a cold drizzle that blanketed Silverwood in a wet, gloomy veil. Laura pulled the curtains shut, double-checked every window, made sure the front door was locked. She didn't trust anyone anymore, not the landlord, not the neighbors, not even the mayor. Helen, are you okay? She whispered. Helen lay on the sofa under a blanket. She wasn't feverish, but her body still trembled, lips pressed tight. Paco the bear was clutched close to her chest like a sacred charm. She hadn't spoken since early evening. Every time Laura asked her something, she'd only nod or shake her head, her empty eyes focused on something adults couldn't see. Late at night, Laura made herself a cup of tea. As she stepped back into the living room, she froze. Helen was standing upright, completely silent, eyes wide open, pupils rolled back to show only the whites. Her body was rigid, arms hanging limply at her sides. Helen! Laura screamed, dropping the teacup. No response. Helen, it's Mommy. What's wrong? She rushed to her, but before she could touch her, Helen began to speak, not in her own voice, but in a deep, gravelly tone that echoed through the room as if rising from the earth itself. They held me. They laughed. They poured cement over me. I cried. But no one came. Laura backed away, horror flooding her. She's inside my daughter. Helen turned her head very slowly, locking eyes with her mother. Father Lawrence, he said, let her sink in silence. God will forgive. But God did not forgive. Helen, please. I'm sorry. Don't let her hurt you. Suddenly, Helen convulsed violently and collapsed to the floor. Laura rushed to her, cradling her icy body in her arms. Helen opened her eyes and burst into tears. "Mom! I couldn't stop her. I didn't want her to come in." Laura sobbed. "I know. I'll protect you. I promise." Then, the floor trembled. Laura held her breath. She pressed her hand to the tile. Thump. Thump. Very faint, but clear like a breath from beneath the ground. The lights in the house flickered again, the ceiling bulb pulsing like a heartbeat. Laura clutched Helen tightly and looked around. The kitchen door creaked open on its own, a long, slow groan. "Mommy!" Helen screamed, burying her head in her mother's chest. Then, from the living room, a pungent metallic smell began to spread thick and foul like blood. Laura grabbed a damp towel and pressed it over her nose. Her breathing quickened, chest pounding so hard it ached. She glanced at the mirror on the wall. And behind her, stood a figure. It was an older woman in a tattered nun's habit, her face swollen and bruised, eyes rolled back completely white. Her mouth was wide open, and blood was streaming down her neck. Laura spun around. There was no one there. But in the mirror, the woman remained. Helen curled up tighter. "She's really angry, she wants everyone to know. We'll tell them. I swear we will. But don't hurt her. Don't hurt Helen anymore." Laura shouted into the air, hoping something was listening. All the lights in the house went out. Only the rain, distant thunder, and Laura's ragged breathing remained. "Helen! Where are you? Helen!" "I'm here," the girl's voice called out, but it came from the kitchen. "Don't run off." Laura ran toward the kitchen. No one was there. "Helen!" Tiny footsteps echoed from upstairs. Laura bolted up the stairs, nearly tripping. The bedroom door was wide open. The air inside was freezing. Helen stood in the middle of the room, eyes closed, arms raised toward the ceiling. She said, "They stuffed a cloth in her mouth, she couldn't breathe, but she remembers everything." "Helen! Can you hear me? Where are you?" She saw light. But they held her down. The cement was so cold. Laura screamed, "Enough. You are not a sacrifice. If she wants justice, I'll bring it, but not by hurting my daughter." Suddenly, a gust of wind burst through the closed window, sending the curtains flying, and extinguishing the candle on the table. Helen collapsed. Laura rushed forward. The girl had passed out. "Mom, it's so cold." "Mommy," Helen whispered faintly in unconsciousness. Laura carried her downstairs and tucked her under a blanket. The stench of blood still lingered, and the house remained unnaturally cold, despite the lit fireplace. Laura knelt beside her daughter, clinging to her like the last bit of warmth left in the world. The church bell suddenly rang, echoing through the night. Dong! 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 Laura knew it was a warning or the beginning of something deeper, something that wouldn't stop if she stayed silent. The next morning, Laura woke with swollen eyes and arms still wrapped around Helen. The girl had drifted into an exhausted sleep after the night's torment, occasionally whimpering like she was fighting off a spirit not meant to inhabit her small body. Laura got up, changed clothes, washed her face, and carefully packed Mary's letter, the broken crucifix, and the tattered nun's veil into a fabric bag. Her eyes no longer held fear, they burned with anger and resolve. "Stay here, Helen," she whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. "I'm going to do the right thing." She walked to the village hall, a crumbling two-story building with peeling walls and a faded crest over the arched entrance. At the desk sat Mayor Richard Bennett, a portly, middle-aged man with neatly parted hair and a smug expression that never quite left his face. "Ms. Laura? What brings you here?" he asked, glancing down at the fabric bag she carried. "I'm submitting evidence of a murder that happened in this village in 1974. The mayor raised an eyebrow. "What murder?" The disappearance of Sister Mary Allen. The room fell silent. That case was closed long ago. No proof she was harmed. Well, now there is. Laura pulled out the plastic-sealed letter and placed it on the desk. This is Mary's handwritten letter. It was buried beneath my floor right where Helen said it would be. Richard picked up the letter, flipping it over. His eyes froze on the line, "If I disappear, please look for me beneath the house." "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice lowering. "I dug under the floor." Along with the letter were a nun's veil, a broken crucifix, and dried blood. He pushed the letter back toward her. "I don't know what you're trying to do, but this shouldn't go public. This is a village, not a city. We survive on peace. Peace built on murdering a pregnant woman and burying her alive. You don't understand," Richard gritted his teeth. "We can't let the past destroy the present. You're ruining the reputation of the church. Of this village." Laura slammed her hand on the desk. "What about lives? About justice? My daughter is being haunted every night by a tormented soul you all helped silence." Richard stood abruptly. "If you keep this up, I'll have the county police remove you from the village for causing disorder." "Try me," Laura growled. "I've already made copies and mailed them to the county courthouse. I'll also take it to the press. You should start preparing your testimony." She turned and left his office, his furious stare burning into her back. Just outside the building, Laura saw Mr. Anthony standing across the street, holding a grocery bag. He walked over, face tight with worry. "You just met with Richard?" "Yes. He won't be able to shut me up. I'll see this through." Mr. Anthony sighed. "Did you know, the one who ordered cement to be poured over that floor was Richard's father?" Laura froze. He was one of the 3 men there that night. And now Richard's using the power his father left him, to keep that truth buried. "You need to be careful. They won't hesitate to go further." "I'm not afraid," Laura said. But just a few hours later, when she returned home, she realized Anthony hadn't been exaggerating. The front door had been forced open, the lock bent and twisted. A handwritten note was taped to the door. "Get out. Stop digging up the dead. You don't belong here." Next to it, her car's windows were smashed, the tires slashed. "Helen," she screamed, rushing inside. Thankfully, Helen was still asleep on the sofa. But Laura noticed someone had spat on her leg. Mud had been hurled at the windows. She wiped the filth away, then sat down and clenched her fists. She didn't cry. She was furious. That evening, Laura took Helen to the market for groceries. The moment they stepped into Mrs. Rose's shop, everyone inside fell silent. Mrs. Rose approached, concern etched into her face. "Did they attack you?" "I'm fine. I'm used to it." From behind, Matthew stepped forward. "You again? Why haven't you left this village?" Laura turned to him. "I'll leave when Mary sees the light of day." "You're making this up. That girl was insane. She probably ran off and died somewhere. Her letter isn't insanity. It's despair," Laura replied calmly. Julian stood up from a nearby table. "Who do you think you are? Some kind of savior? Helen is only 7. She's been suffering with fever and headaches from the crime you all tried to bury. I'm not a savior. I'm a mother. And mothers don't stay silent." A woman named Diana, who owned the vegetable stall, interjected. "Enough. You're scaring our children. Every night they cry about Mary's ghost. It's your fault. What did Helen do wrong?" Laura said loudly. "Why do the guilty get defended while the cursed child suffers?" The market fell into heavy silence. Then Matthew spat on Laura's shoe. "You should shut your mouth. And leave." Laura wiped it away with a napkin. I'll leave. But not before every single one of you knows the truth. She took Helen by the hand and walked out. Eyes followed her, angry, hateful, and fearful. That night, in the living room, Laura laid out the letter, placed the broken crucifix on the table, and rested a hand on her daughter's head. Listen to me, Helen. Yes, Mommy. Everyone in this village might hate me. They might break my car, curse me, spit on me, but they will not silence me. Helen looked at her, tears in her eyes. I don't want her to be angry anymore. And I don't want you to endure another night like that. I'm going to end this. I promise. Laura sat alone in the living room. Morning light shone through the curtains, casting soft rays across her weary but resolute face. On the table lay all the evidence: the sealed letter, the broken brass crucifix, a strip of the nun's veil, and a small glass jar containing a sample of dried, blood-stained cement. Helen slept peacefully on the sofa. The nightmares had quieted these past few days. As if Mary's spirit was waiting for something to change. Laura took a deep breath. It was time. She began writing, each line filled with fierce determination. To the District Court of Greenville County. My name is Laura Harris, currently residing in the village of Silverwood. I am submitting evidence related to the 1974 disappearance of Sister Mary Allen. The materials were discovered directly beneath my home, in what is believed to be the site of her murder and burial. Attached were photos, physical samples, a copy of Mary's letter, and the DNA results that Laura had discreetly ordered a week ago from a private lab matching the blood sample with civil records in Vermont. She sealed the envelope, affixed the stamp, and headed to the village post office. The clerk, a young woman named Beth, looked at the thick envelope and hesitated. Legal documents, Ms. Laura? Yes. Send it as quickly as possible. It might open a murder investigation. Beth watched her leave with a curious, unreadable expression. No one else in the village had dared do what Laura just did. But now, everyone was watching. 2 weeks later. Laura received a call from an unknown number. Hello. This is the Greenville County Investigation Unit. Is this Ms. Laura Harris? Yes. We've received the case file you submitted. The court has officially reopened the 1974 disappearance of Sister Mary Allen. I'm calling to inform you that a forensic investigation team will arrive in Silverwood next week. Laura's heart pounded. Thank you so much. We'll also need to speak with your daughter. She shows signs of sensory witness response. A trauma specialist will be accompanying us. She'll cooperate. She's already endured too much. When Laura hung up, she looked over at Helen, who was peacefully playing with puzzle pieces near the window. Her face looked brighter than it had in days. There was a shift in the air, as if Mary's soul had opened its eyes waiting for justice. 2 weeks later, homicide investigators and journalists from the Greenville Times arrived in front of Laura's house. The villagers crowded around like it was a festival. No one dared step inside, but they whispered, pointed, blending fear with curiosity. The lead investigator, Inspector Mark Bennett, a tall man with a firm stance and piercing eyes, shook Laura's hand. You've done what no one in this village dared to do for over 40 years. I only did what a mother is supposed to do, Laura replied. With him were Grace, a trauma psychologist, and Nathaniel, a forensic analyst. They cordoned off the floor area, examined the blood traces, took measurements, and collected samples. Nathaniel crouched over the cement stain with a handheld analyzer. Degraded hemoglobin. But it tests positive. It's human blood. Laura handed over the DNA sample she had prepared in advance. Nathaniel opened the file and nodded. This genetic segment matches a civil record from Vermont. A man named James Allen, born in 1975, Mary's son. Mark turned to Laura. Do you know him? Never met him. But I know he's the final piece of the story. The next day, the media exploded. Headlines spread across the county. New discovery in 1974: nun disappearance, evidence of rape and live burial. The forgotten mother, the son who never knew her secrets of Silverwood unearthed. The first to fall was Mayor Richard Bennett. Reporters dug into his past, unearthing the role of his father, Lucas Bennett, who had been the village police chief in 1974 and the one who signed off on closing the case after just 3 days. Facing public outrage, Richard was forced to resign. Images of him surrounded by reporters, hiding his face, head bowed, spread rapidly. Television crews broadcast the front of Town Hall, where villagers held signs reading, "Justice for Mary Allen. No one can silence the truth." In a brief press conference, Inspector Mark declared, "We are expanding the investigation into individuals named in the 1974 report. Those previously spared due to lack of evidence are now being summoned. They will be held accountable." Laura watched the news, tears running down her cheeks. Helen sat beside her, holding her hand. "Mom." "Yes, sweetheart." She smiled, "In my head." Laura froze. "I don't hear her anymore. I just saw her hug me, then disappear like smoke. She's not sad anymore." Laura hugged her tightly. "You're amazing. I'm so proud of you." Helen leaned on her mother's shoulder. She said, "I have eyes like her son." The comment made Laura pause in silence. 2 days later, James Allen, a man near 50 with salt and pepper hair and solemn eyes, appeared at Laura's doorstep. "You're Laura Harris." "Yes. You found my mother." Laura nodded. "Come in. I'll tell you everything." James stepped in, every footstep heavy. Laura showed him the letter, the recovered items, and told him all about what had happened with Helen. When he finished reading, James broke down. He collapsed to the floor, clutching his head, sobbing uncontrollably. "They said she abandoned me. They put me in an orphanage. Said she was crazy. I've lived with a wound I couldn't name all my life." Laura sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "She never abandoned you. She tried to tell the truth and they silenced her." James looked up, eyes full of tears but also clarity. "I'll do whatever it takes to restore her name. I owe her everything." Helen stepped into the room and walked up to him. "You're her son?" James nodded. "Yes. I'm James." Helen smiled softly. "You have her eyes. Sad, but kind." James chuckled through tears. "Thank you, sweetheart." Laura stood. "We'll finish this together. The 3 of us." James took their hands. "Justice won't stop now." The following month, Silverwood fell into an unfamiliar hush, shocked, quiet, and anxious. Laura's house became the center of attention for journalists, TV crews, human rights groups, and even the local diocese. Those who once spit in her face now lowered their heads when they passed her. One morning, Laura was making tea in the kitchen when Helen walked in holding Paco the bear, her face beaming. "Mommy," she said, "last night I dreamed of her for the last time." "Mary?" Laura paused. Helen nodded. She was wearing a new habit, her face wasn't bruised, and her hair was longer. She didn't cry anymore. She hugged me and said, "Thank you. Thank you for listening." Then she walked into the light. Laura set her cup down, eyes misting. "You helped her rest in peace, Helen." "Not just me," Helen grinned. "You and Uncle James too." The doorbell rang. Laura opened it. It was James Allen, wearing a white shirt, holding a bouquet of white daisies and a small wooden box. "You're early," Laura said. "We've got something big today. Are you ready?" "Ready." James nodded at Helen. "You're the one who brought my mother home." "I just listened to my heart," Helen replied, then unexpectedly hugged him. James choked up. At the old church where Mary once served, a memorial service was held. For the first time in half a century, the church bell rang for truth, not silence. The ceremony was led by Father Thomas, a newly appointed priest replacing the one removed for covering up crimes. "We are here," his voice echoed, "to restore the name of a woman stripped of her dignity, her life, and her faith." Laura, James, and Helen sat in the front row. Beside them were Mrs. Rose and Mr. Anthony, the first villagers brave enough to stand for truth. Mary's photo was displayed with honor on the altar. Below it, a new granite memorial plaque read, "Mary Allen, the forgotten mother, has returned to the truth." The once broken crucifix had been restored and now sat at the center of the plaque, gleaming like a wound shield. After the service, people gathered outside. Reporters surrounded Laura. "Ms. Harris, how do you feel today?" one asked. Laura looked straight into the camera, voice firm. "This is not my victory. It's justice for someone buried in pain for 50 years. A soul once silenced now has a name. And my daughter Helen was the one who heard her cry." Helen held her mother's hand and spoke softly into the mic, "I didn't see her with my eyes. I saw her with my heart." The crowd grew emotional. James stepped forward, hugging Laura and Helen in front of everyone. "I lost my mother before I ever met her," he said. "They lied to me, called her insane. But because of them, I've embraced her through the truth." The villagers, silent throughout the ceremony, finally began to cry. Elderly, youth, women, they looked at each other with mixed expressions, shame, remorse, and admiration. Diana, the woman who once insulted Laura at the market, stepped forward. "Ms. Laura. I'm sorry for everything I said. I didn't know." Laura met her gaze, voice gentle, "Knowing is enough. But don't be silent anymore." An old man next to her nodded. "This village owes Mary and your family far too much." That afternoon, at Laura's house, the three of them sat on the porch, watching the first sunset that felt truly warm since arriving in Silverwood. "I'll remember her forever," Helen whispered, still hugging Paco. James handed her the wooden box. "This belonged to my mother. Inside is a hairpin she wore as a young woman and a small notebook. She wrote a journal in Latin. Would you like to keep it?" Helen opened the box gently, as if it were treasure. "I'll keep it safe. I promise." Laura sat beside her, eyes gazing into the distance. "Some pain can't be erased, but it can be healed if we dare to face it." James nodded. "And some souls don't need prayers, they need the truth. And someone like my mom," Helen added, turning to hug her mother tightly. 1 week later, the provincial government organized a special ceremony in Greenville County. Laura was honored with the title of Courageous Citizen for Justice and Human Dignity. During the speech, the Chief Justice of the court declared, "Today we honor a mother, a woman, a citizen who dared to confront half a century of silence to restore the name of a forgotten woman. Ms. Laura Harris is living proof that truth never dies." The entire auditorium rose to a standing ovation. Helen beamed with pride as she watched her mother walk up to receive the medal. That night, when they returned to the village, Laura unlocked the door to the house that had once been filled with darkness. But this time no moaning, no metallic stench, no icy gusts of wind. Only Helen, sitting on the floor playing with Lego bricks, right on top of the gray tile that had once been the center of so much horror. "Mom," she said. "She's not here anymore. But I think, she's in a really beautiful place now." Laura sat down beside her and stroked her hair. "I believe that. She's gone, and left us with a powerful lesson." "What lesson, Mom?" "That there's nothing more frightening than silence in the face of evil." Helen nodded thoughtfully. "Mom," she said, "I feel like we're not outsiders anymore." "Oh. Why's that?" "Because, people in the village started saying hi to me." Laura laughed. so breaking silence can open people's hearts too. She looked up, through the window, where soft moonlight bathed the ground like a gentle blanket. A breeze passed, carrying the scent of white daisies. There were no more angry spirits. No more crying in the mirror. Only peace at last. The story of Laura, Helen, and the spirit of Mary Allen teaches us this. The truth, no matter how long it's been buried, will always find a way to be heard. Silence in the face of injustice is the most dangerous kind of complicity. One courageous person, even if alone, can change an entire community if they dare to stand for what's right. Empathy, motherhood, and integrity hold the power to heal even the deepest historical wounds. And in the end, it is only by facing the truth that we can find peace both in life and beyond death.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.